Okay, so welcome to the discourse, The Future of Business is Social, which is held as a part of the Global Entrepreneurship Week. The person who's holding the presentation is Ms. Anja Šerc. Anja works at the Slovenian firm BB Consulting. In the past 5 years in her professional field, she has dedicated herself to the promotion and development of companies with social impact, example companies that were set up with the aim of solving one or more challenges of modern society. Today, she is involved in developing and coordinating programs that offer support to companies in the beginning of their business journeys. She has connected more than 1,000 people with the Viva Institute, providing diverse opportunities for 49 companies in cooperation with more than 25 partners, leading Slovenian and international organizations and public institutions. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section of either Zoom or Facebook Live, and I'm sure Anja will gladly answer them at the end of the video. So Anja, you can continue with the presentation.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you here today. Thank you for inviting me to host this lecture on a very important topic that is going to be even more important after the crisis that we are faced with today. I'm going to share a presentation with you, and in the meantime, also in the chat, I'm going to send some links for interactivity so that we can connect in the virtual world. Usually I would be asking questions when you would be sitting in front of me, but this time this is unfortunately not possible, so we're going to have to use the virtual tools at our disposal at the moment. So I'm going to start the presentation with a short introduction on where I'm coming from and where is my, let's say, where is my entry point to this topic. So I just need to find my presentation. I'm sorry for this. It was working fine before. I'm just going to open it, and I need to close this. Just a second. Here it is. I hope you can all see it. Lana, give me a thumbs up if you are able to see it. Here it is. So I come from a team, BB Consulting, where my current workplace is at. So we are a business consulting firm with over 19 years on the market, and we're a team of 4, and we are led by 5 values that are written down in your left corner. So we try to approach the business from a very personal perspective, from a very value-led perspective. And before that, I was, as Marcus said before, very active in developing social enterprises per se. So I was working directly with businesses at the beginning of their business path and help to develop their business model and connect them to relevant partners. Now, why do I believe that the future of business is social? Is that we in our societies lack very much resilience. What the current crisis has shown us is that the resilience of our systems is under a big question mark. So resilience, how are we going to rebuild our societies, is very questionable at the moment. And I do believe that the social enterprises, social businesses bring the necessary resilience to the economy. The latest studies have shown that the longevity of enterprises that create value for all stakeholders is much longer than the enterprises that strive only for profit as their main goal. So the resilience, the creation of social values, resilience is directly, for me, connected to creation of social value. And by that, because when we need, let's say, when we create value, then we are also needed by a much wider environment. And if we are needed by a much wider environment, then people are also going to use our services much more. So I do believe that what we need to build in the post-world crisis is businesses that bring this quality to the economy. And what do I mean when I say that the future of business is social? Is I mean that it creates value for the society, environment, owners, and the employees. So it's not just creating value for the owners, but it's also creating value on a much wider level. But before I continue with my lecture, is because I don't see you, I don't know what your expectations are, I'm gonna send in our chat a link to a short questionnaire, which I hope you're gonna answer. And the question is going to be, what are your expectations for this hour? So what do you see as something that we can talk about? What interests you on this topic, so that I can see more where the vibe of this group is. So I sent in the chat a link, and I hope you're going to fill it out so that I get an impression of where you're coming from, like where are your interests in this topic, why you're here today, what do you expect to hear, so that we can continue from that and I can integrate some of the expectations maybe in this lecture. Okay, there's still no answer, so I'm going to continue with the lecture and see if something happens in between. I'm going to refresh it, but in the meantime, I'm going to go to continue with the lecture and where I come from. So what have we seen with the COVID crisis is that it had very clear, very hard impacts on our society. So it created a lot of negative negative impacts in terms of education, access to education. As we are talking today, a lot of students do not have access to education as we know it. There has been a lot of negative impact on the care sector. Care is not available at the moment to a lot of people, mainly from economically deprivileged groups. We have seen the vulnerabilities of our health sector. The main issue we're seeing is that this is primarily not a disease type of, not a health issue, but access to health issue. We have seen how hard it hit employment, the effects of which we are going to see mostly after a year. We have seen a lot of gender equality issues with the crisis as it's unfolding. A lot of unpaid work is on the women. And we have seen a lot of new disparities in terms of increasing inequalities in our societies. So these are all the social effects that we as businesses, as societies, are going to have to deal with once the immediate health crisis is over. And I do believe that the answer to this can be provided. All these challenges create new opportunities for businesses to reorient themselves, to create more value, to remedy some of these effects that the crisis has caused. So as we are going to move out and build new solutions, new businesses, the ones that are going to be able to address these issues are going to be the ones that are going to create more value in our society. So as we continue, this is not the only crisis we are faced with. There is a very large need. There was a very large existing need in our societies even before the crisis. This is one of the graphs by one of the new emerging economists that I highly recommend that you look up, is Kate Raworth, who writes about the new approach to society. So how do we think about the role of businesses in our societies? And she talks about the need that we move from linear to circular. So we need to start understanding the needs, the unmet needs of our societies in a circular way, so interdependent as a circle. We need to start thinking about it as interconnected challenges. What we have seen with the COVID crisis is that we need to start linking environmental and social challenges. And we need to start thinking new ways about growth. So the growth is not the ultimate goal, but the goal of the businesses should become creation of value. So she talks about two things that are happening in our societies and that businesses need to start addressing. The first is that we have overshot our ecological ceiling, meaning climate change. We have land conservation is at stake. We have tremendous loss in biodiversity. What on the other side is happening in our societies is that we have a shortfall in access to education, access to health. We have housing crises that are very real in urban cities, in urban areas. Mostly the social inequality is increasing as our economies are becoming wealthier. So actually what this circle shows is all the needs in our societies that are not addressed and have traditionally been thought of as the role of the government. But what is happening is that businesses are entering this market, this demand, and are creating new ways to address these challenges and are creating new models with which we can address this downfalls, this system in crisis as we know it. So why now? What is happening in not just in terms of objective need for new business models to address these social and environmental challenges is that societies are starting to react to these shortfalls in ecology and in society. So we have the new generation that is coming to the market as employees, as consumers, and they're starting a new search for meanings. This is most exemplified, for example, by the Greta effect, which is showing how much someone who can address the issues in society, the real issues with which the people are struggling, how much following this can get you. So there is a clear demand from the younger generations that companies should not just provide products and services for personal use for just consumerism's sake, but to start create new value. So creating products and services that bring new quality of life to our societies. The second trend we are observing is that there is a change in consumers' demand. There is a clear indication that the demand for green products, demand for socially responsible products is in increase. We are still not sure what will happen after the crisis, so what the effects of the economical crisis are going to be on this demand, but before the crisis, this trend was very clear and very recognizable. The third thing is that there are new corporate strategies. Businesses are becoming there is more stress on being socially responsible. The firms are integrating new key performance indicators into their businesses. They are starting to cooperate with NGOs. There's this increasing awareness among the business community that something needs to change, but this shift has not happened yet. And we have a changing role of the public sector. So mostly when we think about the social enterprises, the social impact enterprises, is that the state cannot address the social and ecological environmental issues we are facing in a sustainable way. So the public funds cannot address, and the public programs are not efficient in addressing what we are faced with as societies. So these are somehow four main trends that are happening and that show us that there is going to be a new wave of enterprises coming that will capitalize on this need that exists in societies. So we are going to see a new way of understanding the role of business in society, and this is going to go beyond just creating profit for the owners. There are a couple of examples that I would like to talk about, and they're on the spectrum from non-profit to for-profit organizations. So what we can distinguish also in the impact business market, in the social business, is that it is not necessarily that all companies, all businesses, organizations declare themselves as non-profit. It is also possible that and I do understand, and my position is that the companies creating profit are also stronger organizations in terms of extending their impact, extending their mark on the society. So the first one I would like to talk about is a non-profit organization from Slovenia, which we have, with which we have worked with over the years, and it is Smetumet. So they're actually an ecological, social ecological, cultural organization association whose primary goal is to create glamorous objects for daily use from garbage. So their whole model is take something that is creating problems in our societies, and garbage is one of the main problems we are facing, and to turn it into something that can be reused reused in a new way. So we are extracting something from our, let's say, environmental impact and turning it into a new value for users. And they have been developing their designs and creating with that services. All of their profits goes into designing new ways, into designing new products and services, and for organization of activities for raising awareness about the problematics of garbage in our society. If we move out now more to the for-profit sector, and I would put them somewhere in between, is Buurtzorg is one of the pioneering healthcare organizations, and I do recommend that you look them up. They're a Dutch company, and they have been established from the need to address the lack of access to healthcare in the Netherlands. And their main promise was that they're going to optimize the way in which healthcare is provided to the end user. And what they have done is they organized themselves as independent teams working in local areas without a central administration, and have by that managed to decrease their operative costs, and by that increase the profit that is now available to go into the healthcare. It is said by the KPMG study that they have been able to decrease, they have had savings of 40% in providing healthcare to the end users. So it's a major new way of organizing, which is going from the traditional way of doing business, of providing a healthcare service, which is traditionally seen as the role of the government, to providing it in a more efficient way as a business entity. Then we have two that I'm very a big fan of. One is Slovenian and one is global. So Donar, for example, is a chair manufacturer whose goal is to also use design and refurbish garbage into objects, and they use chairs. So they design ergonomically designed chairs, which has a double impact. It creates a value for the user in terms of health, and it also extracts environmental damage from the environment. And then the second is Patagonia, which is an absolute favorite of mine, and I love to talk about it. And I would love if you would have any questions at the end. They are a sporting gear provider, a sporting gear manufacturer, present globally, and they have a commitment of giving 1% of the profits to the environmental organizations from civil society. So 1% of every year generated profit goes into supporting environmental NGOs. They openly share knowledge about new technologies in textile. They have now moved into the food production sector. So they are addressing the main challenges they see in society with a focus on environment. And they are very active also, for example, in criticizing the political establishment, and they use the power of their brand to address directly the social and environmental issues that we are faced with as a society. So what is actually the deal? Where is the difference between classical businesses and let's say social businesses? is that they're established with the intent to create positive social and environmental impact. So the intent of the business moves from creating value just purely in financial terms to deliberately creating value with provable or with measurable positive social and environmental impact. So this is the main difference. The intent is the difference between the two. So why are we creating the business? And this is where this first thing lies. Now, many countries have national legislation. I think that also Croatia is one of them, which defines the protocols or defines the legislation of what it means to be a social business. Slovenia also has it. But there also the European Commission has its own definition, but also there's one movement that I would like to give you, like hint you to, or just like show the direction to, is the big corporations, which are currently leading in development of global standards for what it means to have the intent of creating positive social and environmental impact in the DNA of the society. The second thing that distinguishes social businesses from others is that they are innovative and inclusive. They have innovative and inclusive business models. Usually, we do not see large-scale corporations of businesses that go beyond the trading. What the social enterprise businesses do is they enter coalitions because they understand that in order to address social and environmental issues, we need to cooperate with state actors, NGOs, we need to cooperate with our suppliers, with our employees. So the nature of cooperation with the environment in social impact businesses is different than the one in, let's say, regular businesses. The third point is that what distinguishes them is that we can quantify the value created. We have seen a lot of greenwashing from the beginning, where the corporate social responsibility has been on the rise. So we have to start understanding how to measure and verify the social impacts that we are having. So how are we going to trace our CO2 emissions, for example? How are we going to prove how many garbage have we used in order to create value that we are putting on the market? One example is the very popular indicator, which all of the responsible enterprises are entering now and are making commitments, is achieving carbon neutrality in our societies. So what is the impact that we are going to measure and that we are going to quantify is also one of the questions we need to ask when we talk about social impact enterprises. And the last point is that when we are faced with business decisions in social enterprises, the interests of the stakeholders come before the interests of the shareholders. So when we are making business decision, are we gonna sell that product? How are we gonna sell that product? Under what price? Where are we going to invest? These decisions are led by the impact that we want to achieve by the end, like at the end. And these are like the four main, let's say, broader conditions of a social impact enterprise as we defined it when we were working with social enterprises that go a bit further than just the national legislations provide. Now, the main points when we are starting to build a social enterprise is to first ask ourselves the question, what is our impact model? And by that, we mean, what is the change we want to achieve in a society? So what is actually the value that we are going to create with the business that we are establishing? So this is the first question. It becomes, what is the change we want to achieve with what we are offering to the market? The second thing is value proposition. This is something that we need to answer in any type of business. So what is the unique value that we are bringing onto the market? So what is that? What is our advantage before the competition? Just that in this case, the competition becomes broader. It's not just the competition on the market, but it's also the competition in terms of the government services, in terms of other providers of the same service. The third thing we ask ourselves is, who are the partners we can achieve this change with? So who do we need to bring on board to put our proposition, our business model to the market? Who do we need to achieve the goal, to achieve our value proposition? Who do we need to get involved? So in the case of Patagonia, for example, they had a clear understanding that they need to cooperate with environmental NGOs if they want to contribute to the decrease of the damage that is being done to our planet. And we need to actively involve them in our operations if we want to be credible in being the provider of the solution, or the benefits of like creating environmental value through the products. The fourth is obviously the definition of the product and service that we are bringing to the market. So it's not enough to just have the intent of solving the world, but the product and service need to be clearly defined. So what is it that it's going to bring us? What is our object? What is our final product that we are delivering? And we had a lot of issues defining this product and service with the enterprises we were working with, because it goes broader. When you're trying to address a social or environmental product, you need to look at more aspects than just, okay, this is a product, let's see if we can sell it to someone. Then the fifth one is who are the people that we are working with, who are going to be our core team, and then of course the revenue model. Now, because this is so much, because the social enterprises go beyond creating value just for the owners or just for the customers, there has been an increase also in the trends of financing, like a change in the ways these companies are financed. The first was that there has been a push from the government. So governments were subsidizing the establishment of social enterprises. But as this is evolving, there's also a financial market that is evolving. So if you're interested in like establishing a social enterprise, or if you are interested of what others are doing, I would recommend MACE, which is a Portuguese accelerator focusing directly on social enterprises. They have managed to raise funds from private investors and from foundations in Portugal, and they are focused on early stage growth social enterprises, and we have cooperated with them through the programs. They are growing each year, having 2 cohorts of businesses that can exhibit growth, but at the same time address a social issue, a social or environmental issue. The second one is Phase, which is a German accelerator / intermediary that brings together investors who would like to have a proven social or environmental record of the enterprises. And on the other hand, social enterprises in the region that do not have access to traditional ways of funding or need a different type of capital that is different from banks. And the third one is actually a Croatian fund, which has just been established. So I'm not sure how far in operations it is, but it's a feels good capital, which has secured financing from European Investment Fund. So this is also something you would want to check out if you are a business being established in Croatia with the intent to create positive value for society and the environment. So what all this means is, and I'm aware that we are at the Faculty of Economics as well, is that what the trends in social entrepreneurships are showing us, and that we need to start thinking about value and how we create value in a different way. So social enterprises are the first, let's say, ambassadors of the new ways in which economy can or should work if we are to increase the resilience of our societies. So we need to start thinking about value as something that is creating the common good, as something that we are striving towards as an end to our business operations, not just as a consequence. So we are not just talking about value as price, but we will need to start thinking about new ways of creating new indicators of what we are creating when we are establishing businesses. And this is also another author that I would highly recommend. Is they call the economy. I think that the Economist said that she's the most dangerous economist alive today, because she's changing the ways in which the role of the economy should be in future. So she's saying it's not enough to put a price tag on things, but we need to start asking ourselves the hard question: what is the value that we are creating with businesses? What is the value we are creating as public institutions? And that being the end goal of our creative processes, which business definitely is. Business is still one of the strongest tools that we have. It's just a question of what we are going to use the business for. So are we going to use the businesses to create just the short-term value for the owners, for the owners in a way, which has been the paramount so far? Or are we going to start understanding businesses as vehicles that create value for society and environment? So rather than just taking from society and environment, adding value with the ways in which we offer product services to the market. So there is a new generation of values coming up, and I can give you I will have some links at the end, which can help you better understand. But this is the new generation of key indicators, new value indicators, that we need to start bringing into conversation. We need to start talking about the social and the environmental aspects of what we are doing. And this is the question that I hope we're going to start also to address in our Q&A session, which is following this lecture. So we are going to try to understand, and I hope that we are going to contribute to what is that you want to help create. So what is the value that you see yourself as important for the business community? So what is something that we should be thinking about creating right now, rather than letting it to chance? But before, I will also share this presentation with Lana, with the team, but maybe these are some of the references that you can use if you are interested more in the topic. The first one, which offers an overview of social enterprises, of the trends, is the book of Good Biz, which you can find online. So it's something that is available, and it somehow covers the experiences we had with the entrepreneurship program for social enterprises in Slovenia. The second one talks about this emerging, let's say, a global community of impact-driven enterprises, is the B Corp Handbook. It has examples, it has a roadmap for implementing impact into the businesses. It talks about what indicators you can use, how you can go on this path of change. Kate Raworth is another author, which we have talked about in the beginning. So she talks about where are the main struggles of our societies at the moment, and what the role of economy should actually be. And then the last one, which we covered in the last part of the lecture, is The Value of Everything by Mariana Mazzucato, and she will talk about in that book more about what it means to create value. So the main thing that I want to leave us with is, before we enter the Q&A session, is that the ways in which the businesses are going to start to change after this crisis, and what we have seen also before the crisis, is that the value that we will need to start creating will have to be geared towards increasing the quality of life of everyone in our societies. We cannot afford to be as fragile as we were coming to this point. So I do believe that the future of business is going to be social. We are going to need to start demanding from enterprises, businesses, to show and prove their value to the consumers, to the wider society, but also that we are going to start we are going to have to start being very much more creative in the ways we design businesses, in the ways we build coalitions to create this value, and in the ways we understand what we are bringing to this world. So the creative process of business design is going to start to change, and I hope that we're going to redraw the world as we know it. This experience has hopefully taught us that we can do better and that we need to do better if we're going to survive. If we're going to survive the crisis coming, the crises we're going to be faced with in the future. So this is all from me for this side, and I think that we have some questions in the Q&A session, if I'm not mistaken, or is Marco going to give them to me?
Probably, yeah, that's my job. Okay, so there are a couple of questions, well, two questions from Maria. The first one is, how are you increasing social responsibility of companies in Slovenia?
Okay, so what we are seeing at the moment is that there is a clear trend of developing, there's a new wave of developing indicators of what it means to be social. Or what it means to be environmentally responsible. And what we do, for example, with our clients is we help to define them, what are their areas of influence? So where could they, first of all, decrease their negative impacts for environment, and then on the second hand, where could they increase their social impact through taking care of their employees, through upholding standards in terms of salaries, through hiring practices. So we are talking about these issues, but more general, also the trends are showing that the awareness of businesses is growing, and they do demand new solutions. The problem becomes that we do not have that much clear standards yet of what it means to be responsible. So what are the standards we want to achieve to talk credibly about social and environmental responsibility? But there is an increase and there is a demand for these new standards from my perspective.
Right, thank you for that. The second question was, what are your views on legal framework of social businesses, and how would you change or improve that?
Mm-hmm. The problem, when we were talking about the legislation in Slovenia, and I think that the last law was implemented in 2012, was the question of, is the legislation too strict in terms of that we do not have the practice developed yet. So we had the legal framework before we had experiences with what actually the social enterprises need. So we started to build pretty much a very strict framework. And then my personal opinion is that we need to go broader, that we should loosen up a bit if we're talking about social enterprises, the conditions, because social enterprises then have too much work with themselves rather than with their businesses. So I thought it was a bit premature to talk about all the legal demands and frameworks before actually the practice was established. So what I see as a promising trend, maybe as some of the standards, is the big corporations framework of standardizing what it means to have social and environmental impact. There is also a freely available questionnaire online, which enterprises can, where enterprises can self-evaluate themselves in terms of, and compare themselves to others also on their social and environmental stance. So I think that this will need to evolve. But we first need to start building also, I mean, There are examples, of course, of social businesses, but these two should be more aligned.
Okay. The next question is, do you know how are investors and VCs looking on social startups in terms of funding, then compared to other startups?
Mm-hmm. There is, as with enterprises, the for-profit and the non-profit line that I was showing in my lecture. There is also this trend with the VCs and with investors in Europe. So we have a group of investors, and I would kindly ask you to look up the European Venture Philanthropy Association, which I would put on the more non-profit side. So this is an association of investors that look first and foremost to the social or environmental impact. So they put that impact before the return on investment. So they see the impact as already the return on investment. And there we have loans, which are sometimes also not non-refundable, but so they're the loans, the low interest loans. We see in that non-profit sector also grants, which are tied to social and environmental impact. But there, I was talking about MACE and I was talking about FASE. There you would also, in those associations, you would see investors that demand both. They demand the financial return on investment. Of course, the financial return is lower than it would be in, let's say, technological startup community. But on the other side, we also have, but they look at both. So there needs to be a quantifiable social environmental impact, but also the financial return. So also the specter of investors is very broad. The investment market is still very shy, let's say. It's still subsidized mostly by the European Investment Fund. So you have funds that have this mixed structure of financing where there's a division between, let's say, public funds and private funds. So there's a lot of things happening, a lot of experimentation going on with financing. But what is a good sign is that it is not anymore solely on the states or on the public funds to provide support for social businesses, but it is actually the market of new ways of financing is growing, which is also more demanding from the enterprises. And then there's the third group, which is actually the enterprises that we do not talk about as social enterprises, but I would sometimes say that they have more social or environmental impact, and they play in the regular field of financing. So this is, let's say, a distinction that I would draw.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, well, it's kind of short. Why do social enterprises usually fail?
There's a lot of, like, what we have, actually I will start with the good news, is that the ones that commit themselves to growing have, what we have seen is that the rate of failure in our program was practically it was very low. So I would say about 20% of the enterprises that we worked with over the 6 years have actually failed, which compared to startup communities is a much lower percentage of failure. And this is, I would ascribe this to the very, let's say, to the intent of the founders. Because usually the founders of these enterprises have a very clear ideal, a very clear ambition of what they want to achieve, and they would do it at all costs. Where the problem becomes is not so much failure, but rather growth, I would say. And this is why we have started to work with, we wanted to develop, like the ambition was to develop the financing market, because then that would ensure additional funds for growth of these enterprises. So I wouldn't say that the problem is failure of social enterprises, but rather the lack of necessary conditions for their growth. And what I was saying at the beginning of the lecture is I actually believe that enterprises, social enterprises with social impact, positive social environmental impact, actually are more resilient to the market fluctuations than other enterprises, because communities depend on them, because environment depends on them. And their growth is fueled by people wanting to contribute to that goal. So once social enterprises are from this really, really early stage, and once they come into the first, let's say, growth, not enter the market phase, they have a problem between entering the market, coming from enter the market to the growth phase. And I think this is where the financing comes into question. So that would be my answer. I wouldn't say that they're failing more than others.
Would you say that creating value for society and environment is bringing less profit than answering to instant needs of customers? If so, what is the way to change that?
I talked about some of the trends that we see or also observe is that our world is becoming too full of everything. So actually, it's not just addressing and giving short-term value to the customers, which has been like the modus operandi of our consumerist societies. So we were selling everything that the buyers would buy, and at all costs, even if they didn't want to buy it. But what we are seeing now as we continue, and I do believe that after we're going to come from this crisis, there's going to be even more awareness of the need to change. And all these trends, like new consumers, new ways of corporations starting to change, new failures in our society and environment, they are going to bring new need for new business models. But concerning the profit, the main difference is that I still believe that these enterprises need to create profit. So the profit needs to come along social and environmental impact. So we need to start designing businesses that do everything. But the main difference becomes, how are we investing the profits that come from our market activity? And if we are reinvesting them into the main difference becomes, are we reinvesting them or putting them in the pockets of just like we share the bonuses, or are we reinvesting it into the growth of our businesses, and by that increasing our impact in society? So for example, the Burzorg example I was talking about, they have an enormous growth, but the way they work, not enormous growth, but they have steady growth, but they reinvest it into expanding their networks. And for example, Patagonia is also one of the, they wouldn't even call themselves social businesses, but they have just overcome the 1 billion valuation on the market, but they still stand firmly behind reinvesting a part of their profit about developing new businesses and investing in new businesses that are going to help them on their quest to follow their mission vision of solving Mother Earth, as they say. Well.
Okay, so there's one last question. What is the difference between social innovation and social entrepreneurship?
Social innovation can happen outside of the market for me. So social innovation is creating new solutions for existing problems, social, environmental. So you can design it in a non-entrepreneurial way. You can design it as a model, as an activity, as a project, and it can all be social innovation. Social entrepreneurship, I would say, for me, is translating a social innovation into a business model and making it sustainable through that. So putting it on the market and creating a demand around it. So this is, for me, the main difference.
Well, that was the last question. So I think that this is the end of the the panel. Thank you for hosting the panel. The whole recording, the whole session is being recorded, and you can look it up at our Facebook site. And once again, I'd like to thank you, Anja, for everything. Yeah.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being with you. And thank you all for very great questions. I say goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.